Thanks, everyone. Warm welcome and good afternoon. Welcome, Yen Chong, Executive Director, SGTech, and your team. Welcome, Aslam, and your team, and friends and family from the industry, and SGTech members. We're extremely glad to host this event today as we discuss talent management and how we look at the challenges together looking forward. We are also delighted to say that we are the newest member of SGTech community. We really value the industry network that you have built, and most importantly, how you have catalyzed the ecosystem to make Singapore a digital talent hub. I'm going to cover three topics. One is, generally speaking, talking about what thrives the tech ecosystem in Singapore, talk a little bit about talent crunch, and lastly, also cover a little bit about the evolution of jobs and skills as we see it from Temus. First, on the thriving ecosystem side, the way we see it is typically an ecosystem comes together when a few components come together like a flywheel. It starts with talent and the institutions that produce that talent, innovation and research, looking at technology of the future. Third is capital. That there's enough capital, be it venture, be it private, be it public, to invest. The role of big tech, often playing as an accelerator for small tech and reducing the barriers for small tech to scale. And lastly, use cases that comes both from the public and private sector, but also public and private sector collaboration that is often catalyzed by policymaking. But then again, it ends back to talent because all the learnings from these other circles move back to how talent is shaped, and that's how the flywheel is completed. Actually, when ecosystems fail, it is typically because it lacks either capital, talent, or use cases. Now, I want to come to Temus and introduce Temus a little bit because I think when it comes to building this ecosystem, that is exactly what the purpose of SGTech and Temus comes together. Temus was founded by Temasek in partnership with the Singapore government to focus on three areas. One is to build digital capabilities locally in Singapore, and with that build strong local digital talent in the areas that look at the future of digital. And thirdly, to look at complex transformation projects, particularly as Singapore is looking at transforming education, healthcare, infrastructure, and various other components of the economy. And when I talk about finding solutions to complex transformation projects, it is to say, how can you bring the barrier of transformation down for the various agencies in the public sector or the various companies in the private sector, including SMEs, and find solutions that are faster to implement or cheaper to do, bringing the barrier down. That was truly the philosophy of Temus. But if we double click into what is truly the aspiration of Temus and what would make Temus a success, it is really to be the nucleus of this flywheel that I just spoke about, our ability to bring talent transformation together with public and private sector transformation that we aspire to do, and also bringing big tech and innovation in play as we think about solutioning. Second point I want to talk about is the talent crunch, and you, Yin-Chun, you mentioned this. And when we think about talent crunch, it's no surprise that there is a bit of a mismatch of demand and supply. If you think about demand, the demand is coming from three areas. One is there are a lot of digital-first companies that have started in Singapore, Indonesia, and the region. Grab, Gojek, Shopee, the list is big. These guys are disrupting the legacy companies. So the legacy companies, the disrupted, are thinking of how they can stay relevant. So that is the pool too, where there's a lot of demand for legacy companies trying to think, how do you bring the right talent to fight against the digital-first companies and to transform themselves? And of course, the public sector themselves. Particularly in the context of Singapore, the focus on healthcare, education, and infrastructure. So actually, what has happened through COVID is that the demand side has seen a revolutionary shift in demand, adoption, engagement, any metric that you look at. But if you look at the supply side, what has happened in the supply side is not so much revolutionary, but more evolutionary. Why I say that is because still the supply side is dependent on a very small pool of talent. Think about STEM graduates, think about computer science graduates. And when you think about these pools of talent, you are constrained by the four walls of the universities and the polys that we have, which can only grow in size by a certain amount year on year. So I think if you want to keep up with the revolutionary change on the demand side, we need to be a bit more revolutionary on the supply side and think different, think out of the box. I tell you this because this has been the philosophy of Temus as well and how we think about talent. Some of you may know we launched a Step It Up program, which is a very unique place and train program that takes people with absolutely no tech background, only checks their analytical capabilities and checks their motivation and intent to look for a career in tech, looks at their learning agility, but doesn't ask what their age is, what their sex is, what their background is, so on and so forth. And with these people, once they come through the screening, are trained through a boot camp on specific digital skills and eventually placed in Temus on client projects. So we have about a cohort of total 40, 45 people who have gone through the program. 20, 25 of them have graduated, and there's another 20 who are going through it now. The first batch was in .NET. Now we are doing in low code. But it's very interesting because the kind of talent that we got had absolutely no experience in technology. Not that they didn't want to move, but nobody gave them a chance. We have optometrists, we had Grab drivers who come to the program, we had tutors, we had marketing freelance folks, we had a chef, we have some musicians. It's absolutely amazing the diversity of people who have come to the program, again, demonstrated their analytical capabilities and their motivation, and today in Temus have become .NET and low-code developers. But more importantly, even though they learned .NET and low-code, their learning agility has also helped them to do multiple other things, like be a business analyst, be a QA, play various functions in a transformation life cycle. It just shows that if people have the right skill sets, and if you can train them with the right skill sets, and they understand the basics of software development, that itself, with their learning agility and motivation, can collectively create this talent pool who can do multiple things in the context of transformation. So we are very excited about this program. Now the Step It Up is just one way of filling the talent gap, and also in the process, in our minds, creating a social impact as well. But look, there could be many other ways of thinking creatively, thinking out of the box. As I said, being revolutionary a bit on the supply side. The key is to be very deliberate about the talent strategy, which is a combination of transforming the old, but also transforming the new talent that comes. It is also about setting the right KPIs that drive how you run your training programs. Now, a lot of enterprises in Singapore has training programs, but a lot of times after the training is provided, the individual may not necessarily move to a new function to apply that. And it becomes kind of a part of their training hours or learning credits. Our point is, how can you have a more deliberate strategy to make sure that what they learn can be applied? And third, and most importantly, you have to take risks. Just as you take risks when you launch a new product in a market, not knowing what the outcome will be. Talent is no different. Some talent will work, some will not work, but the fact is that you have to take those risks, keeping the long term in mind. I think I'll cover the third point, which is more on the evolution of jobs and skills, and I'll use a bit of history here. If you look at the last 200 years, jobs and skills kind of evolved, multiple iterations. 200 years back, it was about industrialization and urbanization. Then in the mid 20th century, it was more about computers and automation. Last 3 decades was defined by what I would say globalization, a very service-based economy, and last but not the least, the digital revolution and the AI revolution that we are seeing. Now, if you think about how the skills used to be in the past and how it has evolved, 200 years back, it was highly specialized. It used to be very repetitive tasks that people used to perform, and there were silos of what your role is and what you did. But then as we move down particularly the last 3 decades, when you look at globalization, the complexity increased with the supply chain. If you look at, the service-based economy, for example, collaboration became key. And then now if you look at digital revolution, a broad range of technical and soft skills, and particularly silos between industries disappearing has been the theme. So this brings to the fore that as we look forward, I think the skill is as much about understanding the tech as it is about the application of it. Awareness of the risks is very important. People taking ownership, particularly when it comes to AI, people taking ownership of the decisions they take using AI. Learning agility, both technical and soft skills. And last but not the least, empathy, keeping the human in mind and central as you think about digital. At Temus, when we think about transformation, it starts and ends with people. When we think about training, like I said, in Step It Up, we think about the core skills, how to apply them, and most importantly, promoting learning agility in the institution. Similarly, when we look at solutioning in our transformation programs for our clients, we keep the human at the center, and any solution that we do revolves around the human, and what we say is bringing a human-centric approach to how we think about technology and strategy. We strongly believe in Temus that organizations transform when it is able to successfully transform its people. Similarly, and this is where I think our purpose meets with SGTech, that Singapore's aspirations of a digital hub for the region will be accomplished only when we are able to transform the citizens, the people of Singapore together. So much thanks to institutions like SGTech for catalyzing this. Thank you.
So we have great speakers today. We have Srijay, the Chief Revenue Officer from Temus, and he's going to come from the angle of digital transformation consulting. And I'm so glad to hear his introduction that at Temus, the belief is that it begins with talent, it begins with people, and we grow with people. So frankly speaking, I was very touched hearing that coming from a consulting firm, coming from a tech consulting firm. And of course, we have Mr. Aslam Sardar, CEO of IHRP, a very knowledgeable man. He, at some point, also passed through the tech sector, right, with senior management positions, holding senior management positions. And he is definitely walking the talk. Lots of certifications that he has, from change management to Scrum, you name it, he has it. So in terms of learning and development, continuous learning and development, he's a great example, great role model for us. Right, so today's panel discussion, tough topic, right? Bridging digital transformation and human capital transformation for your competitive growth advantage. Tall order, right? So we are supposed to be discussing overall talent crunch, current challenges and trends companies face, companies like us, the challenges we face when hiring, training, upskilling, reskilling, and retaining our talents in this digital age. The emphasis is that we are now in the digital economy, right smack in the center of it all. So where's our ecosystem? Who are the key stakeholders? How can we also support each other as a collective, right, at SGTech? And how can we come together to tackle these pressing, burning questions, pressing issues, right? So let me start off, landscape, and it's research done by IHRP. Winnie has also touched on it earlier. So Again, according to World Economic Forum Future Jobs of Report 2023, tech adoption will be a key driver of transformation. So all businesses, whether we are digital first or digital second or digital third, we are all in the midst of transformation, right? And it's gonna be, we're already in it. The next 5 years, it will escalate. It will pick up even more speed and momentum. So with employers expecting structural labor churn of 23% of jobs in the next 5 years, right? 1 out of 5 of your employees will feel the need or see the need, or you will see the need to create new roles for your jobs in your organization structure in the next 5 years. That's moving very fast, right? And the impact of most technologies on job is expected to be net positive. So this is landscape research compiled by IHRP, right? So let's discuss a little bit, gentlemen, on the changes and concerns in today's talent and manpower landscape with the economic transformations, digitalization, very competitive market conditions for all of us, disruptions, hurdles, shifts of professional talent, professional manpower, especially when we see the industry having big players, rapid growth, and contractions, right-sizing cycles going on. So with that, may I invite you to share from where you are respectively, which are the human capital challenges today for tech companies? What are the changes? What are some of the changes and transformation strategies needed for us to navigate the path of transformation to growth, moving ahead? Perhaps I can invite Srijay first. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. I think I'll maybe, I mentioned a few points. Oh, is this mentioned a few points earlier, but maybe I'll just iterate two main points. Point number one is, and this is more a broader. I'll make a statement that is broader to the economy. I'll make a statement that is specific to Temus. I think if you look at the broader economy, particularly the private sector, when you think about workforce transformation, you always think about digital talent and look outwards. You have to also look inwards, and you need to look at what you have and how can you transform it. Time and again, sometimes we see this in the private sector where you think about a bank teller. In a decade, as you move into a digital bank, can you retrain the bank teller to actually do that same customer engagement in digital medium? Think about, airport operations, right? Somebody who is working in the airport and today they use walkie-talkies to, kind of trigger people around. Think about this whole concept of how an airport is operated, moving into a mobile phone, just like how Uber and Grab runs. Can you retrain this guy to use the digital medium to be more productive in what they're doing? All these are trainable, but it requires planning. It requires investment. It requires foresight. It requires long-term thinking. So I would say that when you think about this workforce transformation, it is as much about looking inwards as it is about looking outwards and kind of looking for talent outside to fill the gaps. I think specific, if I think about specific to Temus, we, as I said, we are of course very vested in building talent. I talked about Step It Up program in the context of Temus's own needs, but a similar program can also be applied in the context of other private sector and public sector companies, which means that if there is a certain need in a private company, you can reverse engineer a program that helps fill that job, fill that role, fill that function, the skill that the individual who is retrained needs to be applied. And for that, again, it comes back to the willingness for people to take the risk, take the leap of faith on looking at non-traditional talent and converting them to digital talent. Yeah.
Thanks, Srijay. Very important concept here that we are not just looking to hire, look at how to hire from outside in, but also the importance of looking inside out and retraining our workforce. And I think I hear you mention several times, even at the podium, the importance of taking that risk and looking to hire skilled talent, which may not have 100% matched, right, with the technical or the academic background, but with the analytical skills and the willingness, right, to participate in the growth transformation of a company. So I hear that. Thanks for sharing. And for Aslam, would you share a little bit with us what sort of changes do we need and transformation strategies that we need as we navigate from transformation to growth?
Yeah, so I thought perhaps a good way to think about this is to share with you what Microsoft. So I was in an earlier talk this morning, and Microsoft has this report that they recently shared. They said that 88% of the new hires need to have digital skills, right? So that was like one of the top line numbers that they shared. And when I thought about that, and I look at the current workforce, it reminded me of this term called currency, skills currency, right? If you look at skills as a form of currency, this currency can actually devalue. And LinkedIn actually came out with a report where they studied all the skills in 2015, and they looked at it and said, how many of those are relevant today? In fact, globally, 25% of those skills are no longer relevant today, right? Actually, in Singapore, it's 36%. So in Singapore, the decay is much faster, okay? And if you take that concept and you look around, and many of you here are technology, experts or in that field, you look at ChatGPT, the rate at which ChatGPT has been has gained adoption. From the point they launched until they reached 100 million, it took them about 2 months, right? TikTok, 9 months, Instagram, 2.5 years. So if you look at the pace at which it is, technology is actually permeating, diffusing, and especially Gen AI, it is no longer just automating hands and legs or manual kind of work. It's going into a broader segment of the society or of the sectors, the economic sectors. And they are even talking about automating the mind. So just imagine the professional services are also going to get disrupted, and there's going to be displacements in those spaces. Now, if you take all that into consideration and look at where would the business sit, with this kind of technology, right, comes a lot of opportunities. So for businesses, they naturally would, transforms the way they work. They'll offer new products, new services to their customers, which means their workers also have to change. So I think, right, it is almost inevitable that skills and upgrading the skills of not just the existing workforce, but as individuals, we ourselves have to upgrade, becomes absolutely critical. And I think there must be a mindset to invest in these skills. And when I think of skills, I feel it's almost an existential issue for both organizations and the individual. And today, if you don't invest in those, you're going to find it very difficult to compete, especially as technology keeps changing at a much faster and faster pace.
So I hear from Aslam, key concept of workforce, the idea of workforce transformation, the importance of skills-based hiring. I like to be very clear when I'm looking at new concepts, right? So I went online, workforce transformation, right? There are actually quite a number of definitions. I couldn't find the Oxford one or the Berkeley one. If you can, let me know, right? But I found a few. One of it, a few kind of resonated with me. Workforce transformation refers to the process of realigning a company's employee base to ensure their skills match the company's strategic needs. So a company undergoing workforce transformation assesses its existing skills, identifies the skills needed to meet future goals, maps out any skill gaps, and once you identify those gaps, you can close them through targeted reskilling, upskilling, and hiring. Technical definition. Another definition which I kind of liked was that workforce transformation is the process by which organizations empower their employees. I hear that from Srijay's introduction as well. Empowering employees to adapt and excel along with an organization as it grows and changes, and involves curating hiring and employee development processes to align employee skills with the company's needs, right? So this concept of workforce transformation, and we want to get into a little bit deeper, skills-based hiring, right? Perhaps for Aslam, could you like take us in a little bit deeper on skills-based hiring? We kind of know like it's to do with, at the very basic, is to stop looking at just academic qualifications, for example. Maybe we can even not look so much at prior experience. Like we have the example cited by Temus, right? That their program, their Step It Up program, converting non-techs to low coders and programmers in 4 months. So, and therefore, creating that talent that you need from scratch, right? So, question to Aslam, take us through skills-based hiring. Why is this increasingly important for businesses and tech organizations like us to develop and adopt in our HR and workforce management strategy?
Yeah, very good question. And as you were asking this question, I remember having a coffee with a CIO of a listed company. And I asked him out for coffee only because we were in an event, and he lamented. And he said, my problem is my HR people. You know why? Every time I ask for resumes, they'll give me resumes for candidates with 4 years, after studying 4 years in the degree. But then when I look at their capability and their competency, they cannot do a lot of tech that is more current today, right? So you go with degree. By the time he graduated, actually the tech has already moved, if you have studied 3 years or 4 years, right? Because technology is really moving so fast. And he was telling his HR, he said, why can't we just do some sort of like a hackathon, and then we get the brightest, and even if they are in poly, quickly get them in and pay them well, right? And he was sharing his lament. And I thought that was actually quite a real problem, I mean, if you, in certain industries that is moving so fast, if you hire based on degrees, which is the traditional route of education, right, you may actually be hiring someone who is a little bit behind the curve in terms of skills and capabilities, right, as opposed to perhaps looking at someone who is more current, who has kept himself current through credentializations, acquiring certifications along the way as they progress in their careers, or even if they are not in their careers, from students or kids who have done those certification programs. So I think the shift must be to move away from just looking at degrees and really looking at certification, or in IT, they do a lot of skills badging as one way to build a more current workforce and to solve some of these issues. The other thing is actually talent attraction. If you start to just limit yourself to the sector you're looking at, you're missing out on a lot of other peripheral opportunities to hire. And earlier this year, again in the same LinkedIn event I went, the chief economist was sharing that you can actually expand your talent pool, potential people to hire, by as much as 6 times, just by focusing on skills and not necessarily on the degree that a person has, or the job, the type of experience he has. So really, if you look at skills, you can broaden. And I want to end with a final point that every one of us has a portfolio of skills. Not all the skills you have is irrelevant or useless. I had a very interesting conversation. I remember when I was in my previous role, I was in ST engineering, and I was talking to like an institute, and they do a lot of studies on skills and tasks. And they found a lot of similarities between bus drivers and drone drivers. There's actually a 60% overlap of similarities at the task level between a bus driver and a drone driver. So can you imagine, right? If you really go beyond, say, academic degrees and look at a person's skills, you may find that he may have certain skills that you want, but he may not have all the skills that you want. Then the question for you as an employer is, do I take a bet on this individual, bring him in, train him, maybe he's 60% ready, but I stack him up with another 20-30%, and then the other 20%, let him run. And I think Temus is doing that, if I'm not wrong. The way you are bringing people into your organization, training them. And if we can do this at scale, right, we can actually solve a lot of the skills issue or the hiring issues we have in the IT ecosystem.
Thanks, Aslam, for sharing and leading on from what you have shared, that the importance of skills and how it can bring an organization forward, right, and diversify its reach to talent and also grow its offerings to the market, perhaps. We now come to discuss the concept of competitive advantage, because I think it was one of the keywords in Winnie's Cloud that really stood out, right? We want organizations are looking for profit, and before you can get to profit, you need that competitive advantage, whether in terms of attracting talent, in terms of deploying your talent to where there is profit, right? Bluntly speaking. So let's discuss a little bit on the concept of competitive advantage in today's terms for enterprises and businesses. From your viewpoint, maybe I can check with Srijay. Could you share with us more about the concept of value architecting? I saw this on your website. and your perspectives on its implications, value architecting, for human capital management and driving successful digital transformation.
You maximize profitability when you create value for the consumer or whoever is buying a product. So when we talk about the concept of value architecting, this is really architecting transformation, keeping that value front and center. And that value can be multiple, measured in multiple ways. For the private sector, it can be purely economic. For the public sector, there can be societal value. In some cases, and particularly looking at sustainability and ESG, it's a mix of economic and societal. So there are different ways you can measure value, but ultimately keeping that value equation, defining it with clarity, and your solution maximizing that value function is very important. And that's truly, when we say value architecting in our website, we always question that what we do, can we measure the value that has been created? Because ultimately, for the sake of our clients, they will pay us when they see value. So that's the concept. Now, coming to human capital, who is actually determining the value creation? Again, it comes back to people, right? Users in the context of a product in a private sector, citizen in the context of public sector. They are ultimately using these services and then saying, my life is better, value is created. So again, life turns a full circle from, your perception of value versus your ultimate customer, citizens' actual realization of that value. And it comes back to the model that we say that one is, having clarity on what the value function is, but also having clarity on what does it mean for your user and the human-centric mindset of how we think about transformation.
Thank you, Srijay. Much appreciated, and it's good to hear that, and I think it's in the line of your work that when you do consulting, it's not just about the technology, but the value it brings to the people who are going to use the technology and the employees who will be skilled to learn these technologies, use these technologies in the organization, right? And maybe we now come to look at the opportunities, right? Because we're trying to create value with digital transformation. We're trying to create value with human capital transformation and trying to connect the dots and come together, right? So what are some of the opportunities and imperatives today for businesses to work on digital transformation and human capital transformation? How can businesses, organizations approach digital transformation through workforce transformation and vice versa? So maybe Aslam?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, it's really technology adoption, right? Earlier we were talking with some of the in the audience who were friends of mine earlier, and we were talking about the holy grail is actually the SME sector, right? How do we get them to raise the adoption of technology? So as they adopt technology, clearly workflows and processes will change. And I think one of the things, at least from a HR perspective, where we see the opportunity is to embark on job redesign. And I think job redesign is really an opportunity. When you get into a, and I suppose Temus can weigh in, if you get into technology adoptions and you start to actually adopt more and more technology, you should actually also think of, how is your workflow changing? How is your work changing? Do you need to redesign your job? And if you are looking at hiring based on skills and you're broadening your talent base, right? As I bring them in, how do I actually invest in upskilling them or reskilling them? In fact, there is a Stanford study, I thought it was quite interesting. For every $1 you spend on machine learning technology, actually you need to spend $9 on human capital development. Do you know that? And where does this $9 go to? This $9 goes to recruitment, right? Recruiting, right? It goes into change management. Don't forget that. It goes into training. You definitely need to invest in training. So there are all these considerations and possibly even redesigning your job. So I think when we think of digitalization and leveraging on the opportunities that digitalization can bring, sometimes sometimes when I look at companies, they just buy the technology and they expect the staff to be able to do it, But it doesn't work that way. You actually have to bring your people with you. So I think we cannot be naive and say digitalization is going to give me this big economic efficiency gain that I hope to have, but actually I forgot that I need to train my people, I got to cajole them, I need to bring them along with me, and all that actually means you really must think very hard, and you need that HR component in that whole thinking.
So the key thing is how can organizations acquire, grow our technology capabilities, skilled talent pools to build and sustain digital transformation in our business. This is the thought of the day. We don't have all the answers, but I think today we address some of those through the sharing from Aslam and Srijay. A little bit of nitty gritty, and I think it was in Winnie's slides as well. So today, among our audience, there are probably employers and businesses who are concerned about managing skills, training costs. Just nice, you mentioned every $1 you spend on tech, $9 has to be invested in the training and the human resource part of things. So the employer's real concerns today are managing skills, costs, and returns on investment in today's competitive climate, right? Where the shelf life of skills seem to be shrinking. And here we are saying we need to go towards skills-based hiring and human capital management. So any management perspectives on this? Is there another way for us to look at it? Some of the business advantages of upskilling, for example.
Mathematically speaking, if you think about return on investment, it is a function of the time period you're looking at. If you're looking at an ROI on a 3-month versus a 3-year, the math that you do is very different. So it really depends on how you look at that return from a timeline standpoint. If you look at it long term, yes, the training cost is there and the reskilling cost is there, but it is also, so to speak, amortized over a long-term period, and it is not only about transforming a workforce, but also you can measure it in multiple ways. One is the cost of attrition and hiring new people over that 2-3 year period. The benefits of retention, because if you reskill, a lot of guys will be very appreciative about the reskilling, and they themselves feel future-proof. So I think it comes back to the time horizon you're looking at and how you divide your return to that time horizon.
That's actually a very good point. Probably many of you here, if you are business leaders, you would know when you lose a staff, and then you got to replace them. Is that a cheap exercise? It is not a cheap exercise. And it is not the price you pay in salary or the recruitment cost. It's the opportunity cost of what that one headcount gone and then the time it takes to replace. So that I think is what you were saying, right? That economic value. But I want to take the conversation one more notch up and say, okay, let's talk about training. Do you really today need to go for a 1-day training program or a 2-day training program? I mean, honestly, no, you don't need to. And I think today, business leaders, and I go as further as to say training providers, can actually be a little bit more creative, right? One of the things we do in IHRP, actually, we are not big organizations. We're almost like an SME. And I have to train to keep my staff, feel like, we actually invested in their, in their development. So I don't have a big budget. What do? I've created this thing called the learning circles. So it's a very simple concept. Every year, I will adopt one book, and the book will have, say, 10 chapters. I will form 10 cross-functional groups, and each group will be given 1 month to actually design a training program in 1 hour, teach that one chapter, right? And we do it in a very fun way. If you go to the IHRP social media page, you will see it. We actually post it. And you know what? It has leveled up certain competencies that I feel is important for that particular year. So it didn't cost us anything other than buying the book for the staff to read, right? Which is not very expensive. So I think if we think of development, right, learning and development, we may want to consider, other alternatives. You don't have to go for a long duration 1-2 day program. You can actually self-learn. There's a lot of free resources out there. A lot of actually Queen Bee companies in the tech firm, actually they offer short programs, 1-2 hours. They give you that snippets. And then if you're interested, you can pursue it further. So these are opportunities which small companies, SMEs, or even individuals can tap on. And I feel we really must take the concept of learning and stretch it a bit. And can we go into the bite-sized micro-learning today? Because it is a real problem. Workers today and companies today really have no time. So you cannot put them through an 8-hour program or, one whole day. You might want to break it down to maybe an hour or half an hour. So equivalent to a bus ride or a lunchtime. So those are my thoughts.
If I may recap, the importance of having a strategy, a vision where you will have the right time frame, right? You're looking at things from the right time frame, and getting that buy-in from the employees. And from Aslam, what I hear is very interesting. We have to always be creative. What works for the organization when it comes to training and skilling up our employees and our team members. When we look at it, it may seem very daunting, right? The skills, the cost that we have to invest to train, but are we looking at it from the right time frame? Are we going to run our organizations for the next 10 years? The answer is yes. So what do we have to do in order to run this successfully, sustainably for the next 10 years? So thanks a lot for the sharing. And I think seeing how creative Aslam has been with his own organization, there's much we can look forward to from IHRP. HR trainings that should be bite-sized and should be easily accessible by the HR teams of your organizations. I think we can look forward to that practical learning courses from IHRP, right? And before we wrap up this session, maybe let me just cast a dream catcher, right? From these two gentlemen, please share your personal vision or wish list. How should jobs and skills evolve for our people and our digital futures by the time we reach 2033 and beyond? I'm not going too far away since you said Microsoft takes 7 years, right? So now it's 2023, I'm just asking for 2033 and beyond. How do you think our jobs and skills should evolve for our people? What's your wish? What do you wish to see in our digital future, 10 years from now?
My professor always say, if you can crystal ball, you'll be the richest man in the world, right? So I don't think I can crystal ball so well. But if I could, if there is one hope that I have, is really we're not a big country and we don't have a very large workforce. We only have that few million here. Our supply is literally just one straight line, horizontal line. We have to be a lot more creative in the way we think about our people development, in the way we think of skills. I think we need to be a lot more inclusive. And maybe if I could add two things, right? By 2026, Singapore will be super aged. You know, super aged, we need to have a lot of aging. By 2030, 1 in 4 are going to be above 65. Doesn't mean they're going to retire. It just means that they're going to have a lot of older citizens around. There are 10,000 people with disabilities out there that have difficulty finding a job. If there is one way or one thing we can do to make a difference in this country in 10 years, it is to give this group and those who are going to hit 65 in 2030 and beyond a chance to have a dignified job, right, for the rest of their life. I think if that is a wish list, that could be a wish list. If that's something I hope we can do. And I strongly believe the technology sector, all of you here, are the people who can make it happen.
That's extremely well said. I can't agree more. I will maybe add a philosophical touch to it. And this is from a book I read last year. The philosophical touches comes back to my what I was talking, the last 200 years analogy, which is if you look 100, 200 years back, it was about muscles that defined. If you look at the last 30, 40 years, it has been about the brain. I think, the real aspiration is that the future is about the heart. And I think technology can really accelerate you to follow the heart and do what you want to do. That's truly my wish list and aspiration.
Thank you, Srijay and Aslam, and thank you everyone for joining us.